The blood on her hands had long since dried by the time Lydia Sinclair stumbled into the canyon, her wedding dress torn to ribbons and her feet bare against the unforgiving Nevada stone. She had run from the church in Carson City 3 hours before sunset, fleeing a man she barely knew and a marriage arranged by her desperate father to settle gambling debts. The stagecoach driver who took pity on her had only gotten her as far as the outskirts of a mining settlement called Rawhide before his horses spooked at a rattlesnake and overturned the coach. He had not survived the fall, his neck broken instantly against the rocks, and Lydia had crawled from the wreckage with nothing but the clothes on her back in a horror she could not shake. She had tried to help him, had pressed her hands against his chest, hoping for a heartbeat that never came, and now his blood mixed with the red dust on her palms. The sun had set an hour ago, and the September night of 1908 brought a chill that cut through the thin fabric of her ruined dress. Lydia had no idea where she was going, only that she needed to keep moving, needed to put distance between herself and the life she had abandoned. The canyon walls rose steep and dark on either side of her, and the stars above provided barely enough light to see the path beneath her feet. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hold danger, and exhaustion pulled at her limbs like iron chains. She had been walking for what felt like hours when her foot caught on a root, and she went down hard, scraping her knees against the rocky ground. Pain shot through her legs, and she bit back a cry, pressing her forehead against the cool earth as tears finally came. She was lost, alone, and had nowhere to go, even if she found her way out of this godforsaken canyon. Her father would never take her back after the scandal she had caused, and Gerald Whitmore, the man she had been meant to marry, would hunt her down, if only to salvage his reputation. He was a cruel man with powerful friends in Carson City, and she had seen the rage in his eyes when she fled the altar. Lydia did not know how long she lay there crying before she saw the light. At first she thought it was a star fallen to earth, a golden glow that seemed to float between the canyon walls. She lifted her head, blinking tears from her eyes, and watched as the light grew brighter, closer. It swayed with a steady rhythm, and she realized someone was walking toward her, carrying a lantern. Fear and hope warred in her chest. She pushed herself to her knees, her body trembling from cold and exhaustion. The light continued its approach, and now she could hear footsteps, the jingle of spurs, the creak of leather. A man's figure took shape behind the lantern, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. "Hello?" His voice was deep and careful, concerned rather than threatening. "Miss, are you hurt?" Lydia tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. She managed a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob, and the man quickened his pace. He was beside her in moments, setting the lantern down and kneeling in the dirt without regard for his clothes. "Easy now," he said softly. "You are safe. I have got you." In the lantern light, she could finally see his face. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes that were a startling shade of blue, even in the golden glow. His face was tanned and weathered from sun and wind, with strong features that might have been carved from the same stone as the canyon walls. But his expression was gentle, worried, and when he reached out to steady her, his hands were careful. "What happened to you?" he asked, taking in her torn dress, her bare feet, the blood on her hands. "Were you attacked?" "No," Lydia managed, her voice barely a whisper. "Stagecoach, overturned. The driver, he—" She could not finish the sentence. Understanding filled the cowboy's eyes. "You were in an accident. Were you injured?" "I do not think so, not badly. But I have been walking, and I got lost, and I do not know where I am." He nodded, his expression grim but kind. "You are in Copper Canyon, about 5 miles southeast of Rawhide. That is where I am headed now. Can you stand? I have got a horse just back the way I came. We need to get you somewhere warm." "I cannot go back to Carson City," Lydia said quickly, panic rising in her chest. "Please, you cannot take me back there." The cowboy studied her face for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw there. Desperation, certainly. Fear. But he did not press her for details, did not demand explanations she was not ready to give. "I am not taking you anywhere you do not want to go," he said quietly. "But you cannot stay out here. It gets cold enough to freeze in these canyons at night, and there are mountain lions that hunt after dark. Let me get you to Rawhide, get you cleaned up and fed, and then we can figure out what comes next. Does that sound fair?" Lydia nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. The kindness in his voice was almost harder to bear than the fear and exhaustion. She had grown so used to her father's disappointment and Gerald's cold demands that simple compassion felt like a shock to her system. The cowboy stood and offered her his hands. She took them, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his grip as he pulled her gently to her feet. Her knees nearly buckled, and he caught her instantly, one arm going around her waist to steady her. "I have got you," he said again, and something about the way he said it made her believe him. He picked up the lantern in his free hand and guided her slowly back down the canyon path. Lydia leaned against him more heavily than she wanted to, but her legs felt like water, and every step sent sharp pains through her torn feet. The cowboy did not seem to mind, adjusting his pace to match hers and keeping her tucked securely against his side. "What is your name?" he asked after a few minutes of silence. "Lydia," she said. "Lydia Sinclair. I am Jasper Fitzgerald. Most folks just call me Jazz." He glanced down at her. "You are from Carson City?" "Yes." She hesitated. "I was supposed to get married today." Jasper did not respond right away, and when he did, his voice was carefully neutral. "I am guessing you changed your mind about that." "I never wanted it in the first place." The words came out bitter, sharp. "My father arranged it. I am 22 years old, and he sold me like a horse to pay his gambling debts." "That is a hell of a thing," Jasper said quietly. There was anger in his voice, but not directed at her. "No woman should be forced into marriage. Tell that to my father. Tell that to Gerald Whitmore and his fancy friends who think women are just property to be bought and traded." Lydia's voice broke. "I know I made things worse by running. I know there will be consequences. But I could not. I just could not stand there and promise my life to a man who looks at me like I am something he purchased at auction." Jasper's arm tightened slightly around her waist, a gesture of support. "You did the brave thing, the right thing, and whatever comes next, at least you will face it on your own terms." They walked in silence after that, the lantern swaying between them and casting dancing shadows on the canyon walls. Lydia focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on the warmth of Jasper's solid presence beside her, on the fact that she was still alive and still free, even if she had no idea what came next. After what felt like an eternity, the canyon walls began to widen, and Lydia heard the soft whicker of a horse. Jasper's mount was a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a patient disposition. The horse had been ground-tied, its reins hanging loose, and it stood waiting exactly where Jasper had left it. "This is Copper," Jasper said, running a hand down the horse's neck. "He is as steady as they come. Have you ridden before?" "A little," Lydia admitted. "Mostly side saddle, and not in a long time." "We will take it slow." Jasper hung the lantern on his saddle horn and turned to Lydia. "I am going to lift you up, all right? Try to swing your leg over." He placed his hands on her waist and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing. Lydia grabbed the saddle horn for balance and managed to get her leg over, settling awkwardly astride the horse. Her ruined dress hiked up to her knees, but she was beyond caring about propriety. Jasper gathered the reins and swung up behind her in one smooth motion, his arms coming around her to control the horse. "Just lean back against me," he said. "I have got you." Lydia let herself relax into his chest, too exhausted to maintain any pretense of independence. Jasper clicked his tongue, and Copper started forward at an easy walk. The motion was soothing, rhythmic, and combined with the warmth of Jasper's body behind her and the safety she felt in his arms, Lydia found her eyes growing heavy. She fought against sleep, but her body had been pushed beyond its limits. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was Jasper's voice, soft and reassuring, telling her to rest. She woke to the sound of voices and the glow of lamplight against her closed eyelids. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her heart. Then she felt the gentle sway of the horse beneath her, felt Jasper's arms still secure around her, and the fear receded. "That is her?" a woman's voice asked, sharp with concern. "Found her in Copper Canyon," Jasper replied. "She was in a stagecoach accident. Driver did not make it. She has been walking for hours." "Poor thing looks half dead. Bring her inside. Quickly now." Lydia felt Jasper dismount, felt his hands on her waist again as he lifted her down from Copper's back. She opened her eyes and found herself standing in front of a modest but well-kept house on the outskirts of what she assumed was rawhide. The woman who had spoken was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, and eyes that held the same kindness as Jasper's. "This is my mother, Ruth Fitzgerald," Jasper said. "Ma, this is Lydia Sinclair. She needs help." Ruth took one look at Lydia's torn dress, her blood-stained hands, and her bare feet, and her expression softened with sympathy. "Oh, honey, come inside. Let us get you cleaned up and warm." Lydia found herself being guided into the house, Ruth on one side and Jasper on the other. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the smell of something savory cooking. Ruth led her to a chair by the fire, and Jasper disappeared, returning moments later with a basin of water and clean cloths. "Let me see your hands," Ruth said gently, kneeling beside the chair. Lydia held them out, watching as Ruth carefully washed away the dried blood. Most of it was not hers, she realized with a sick feeling. It belonged to the stagecoach driver, that poor man whose name she had never learned. "The blood is not mine," she said quietly. "The driver, when he died, I tried to help him, but there was nothing I could do." Ruth's hands stilled for a moment, then continued their gentle work. "You did what you could. Sometimes that is all we can do." Jasper had knelt down as well and was examining Lydia's feet. They were torn and bloody from walking barefoot over rocks, and he cleaned them with the same careful gentleness his mother used on her hands. Lydia watched him work, noticing the concentration on his face, the way his large hands moved with surprising delicacy. He had rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms tanned dark by the sun and corded with muscle. There was something mesmerizing about watching him, something that made her feel safe in a way she had never felt before. "These are going to hurt for a few days," Jasper said, finishing with the last cut. "But nothing looks infected. We will bandage them up, and you should stay off them as much as possible." "I will get you some clean clothes," Ruth said, standing. "You look about my size, though you are a bit taller, but anything is better than that poor dress." When Ruth left the room, Lydia found herself alone with Jasper. He was still kneeling by her feet, wrapping them carefully in clean bandages. The fire cast warm light over his features, and she realized he was even more handsome than she had thought in the lantern glow. But it was not just his looks that drew her. It was the gentleness in his strong hands, the concern in his blue eyes, the way he had found her in that dark canyon and brought her to safety without asking for anything in return. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not found me." Jasper looked up at her, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Something passed between them, a connection Lydia could not name, but felt all the way to her bones. "I am glad I did," he said simply. "What were you doing out in the canyon at that hour anyway? I could ask you the same question." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Fair enough. I was coming back from checking on our herd. We have got cattle grazing in the eastern range, and I ride out every few days to make sure they are all right. I was running late tonight because one of the calves got itself tangled in some brush." "Do you ranch then?" "We try. My father died 2 years ago and left us this place. It is not much, just a small spread, but it is ours. My mother and I work it together, along with my younger brother Thomas when he is not off getting into trouble." The fondness in his voice when he mentioned his brother was clear. "What about you? What do you do in Carson City?" Lydia's expression darkened. "Nothing of consequence. I kept house for my father after my mother died 5 years ago. I was allowed to do a little painting, a little reading, but mostly I was expected to be decorative and obedient until he found someone to marry me off to." "You are more than decorative," Jasper said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Lydia's heart skip. "You are brave, strong. Not many people would have had the courage to run the way you did." Before Lydia could respond, Ruth returned with an armful of clothes. "Here we are. Let me help you change, dear." Jasper stood quickly, his ears going slightly red. "I will go tend to Copper," he said, and left the room with the hasty grace of a man suddenly aware he was intruding on women's business. Ruth helped Lydia out of the ruined wedding dress and into a simple but clean day dress of dark blue cotton. It fit reasonably well, if a bit loose in the waist, and Lydia felt more human once she was out of the blood-stained silk. Ruth also provided her with stockings and a pair of soft leather shoes that were too big but better than going barefoot. "There now," Ruth said. stepping back to look at her. "Much better. You must be starving. Come have some supper." The table was set for 3 when they entered the kitchen, and Jasper was already seated, his hair damp, as if he had quickly washed up at the pump outside. He stood when they entered, pulling out a chair for Lydia with old-fashioned courtesy. Ruth served them a simple meal of stew and fresh bread, but to Lydia, it tasted like the finest food she had ever eaten. She had not realized how hungry she was until the first bite, and she ate steadily while Ruth and Jasper kept up a gentle flow of conversation that did not require her participation. "So, what is your plan, honey?" Ruth asked eventually, her voice kind but practical. "I assume you cannot go back to Carson City, at least not right away." Lydia set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly deserting her. "I do not know. I have no money, nowhere to go. My father will never forgive me for the embarrassment I caused him, and Gerald Whitmore will be furious." "Is that the man you were supposed to marry?" Jasper asked, his voice tight. "Yes. He is a banker in Carson City, very wealthy, very respectable, and very cruel." Lydia's hands clenched in her lap. "He made it clear during our brief courtship that he expected absolute obedience from his wife. I was to have no opinions, no interest beyond running his household and producing his children. When I tried to suggest I might continue my painting after we were married, he laughed and told me such frivolous pursuits would be beneath the dignity of Mrs. Gerald Whitmore." "He sounds like a pompous fool," Ruth said flatly. Despite everything, Lydia felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. "He is that." "You can stay here for as long as you need," Ruth continued. "We do not have much, but we have a spare room and enough food to go around. You can help around the house if you want to earn your keep, but there is no pressure. The most important thing is that you are safe." Tears pricked at Lydia's eyes again. "I cannot impose on you like that. You do not even know me." "We know enough," Jasper said firmly. "You are a woman in trouble who needs help. That is all we need to know." Lydia looked between mother and son, seeing the same determined kindness in both their faces, and felt something break open in her chest. For the first time since her mother died, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was not completely alone in the world. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not need to repay anything," Ruth said briskly, standing and beginning to clear the dishes. "Now, you look dead on your feet. Jasper, show Lydia to the spare room. She needs rest." Jasper led Lydia down a short hallway to a small bedroom at the back of the house. It was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small table, but it was clean and comfortable, and more than Lydia had any right to expect. "The room is not much," Jasper said, lingering in the doorway, "but the bed is good, and the roof does not leak." "It is perfect," Lydia said honestly. She turned to face him, suddenly shy. "Thank you, Jasper, for everything. For finding me, for bringing me here, for not asking questions I am not ready to answer." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and somehow more approachable. "You can tell me when you are ready, or not at all. Either way, you are safe here." "I believe you," Lydia said, and realized she meant it. Jasper hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more, then seemed to think better of it. "Good night, Lydia. Sleep well." "Good night, Jasper." She watched him walk away, then closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. She barely knew this man, had only met him hours ago in the darkest moment of her life. But something about him called to her, made her feel things she had never felt before. She thought of the way he had held her on the horse, the gentleness of his hands as he bandaged her feet, the fierce protectiveness in his voice when she told him about Gerald. Lydia shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. She was being ridiculous. She had just escaped one unwanted marriage. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for the cowboy who rescued her. Besides, he had only helped her out of common decency. He probably rescued stray animals with the same casual kindness. But as she crawled into bed and pulled the warm quilts over her, she could not stop thinking about the way his blue eyes had looked in the firelight, or the way his voice had sounded when he told her she was brave. Lydia woke to bright sunshine streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back, and she sat up quickly, wincing as her sore feet reminded her of her ordeal. Someone had left a pitcher of fresh water on the washstand, and Lydia cleaned herself up as best she could, braiding her long, dark hair into a simple plait and smoothing down the borrowed dress. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Ruth already hard at work in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. "Good morning, dear," Ruth said warmly. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Lydia admitted. It was true. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, she had slept deeply and dreamlessly for the first time since her father announced her engagement to Gerald. "That is good to hear. Jasper left early this morning to ride into town, but he said he would be back by noon. Are you hungry?" "Starving." Ruth smiled and set a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her, along with a thick slice of fresh bread. Lydia ate gratefully, her appetite returning now that she was safe and warm. As she ate, Ruth worked beside her, keeping up a steady stream of conversation that was comforting in its normalcy. She talked about the ranch, about the challenges of running it without her husband, about her younger son Thomas, who was currently working at the telegraph office in town. "He is 17 and thinks he knows everything," Ruth said with fond exasperation. "But he is a good boy, works hard, and sends money home when he can. He wants to be a journalist someday, writes letters to newspapers about local happenings. I do not understand it myself, but he seems happy." "It sounds like you have a wonderful family," Lydia said softly. "We do all right." Ruth's expression grew serious. "I know what it is like to feel trapped, Lydia. My husband was a good man, but I married him when I was 16 because my parents thought it was a good match. I was lucky that James turned out to be kind, but it could have gone very differently. No woman should be forced into marriage against her will." "My father did not see it as forcing," Lydia said bitterly. "He saw it as making a practical arrangement. Love did not enter into the equation." "Love always enters into the equation," Ruth said firmly. "Maybe not at first, but a marriage without at least the possibility of love is a prison. You were right to run." Before Lydia could respond, the sound of hoofbeats outside announced someone's arrival. Moments later, Jasper entered through the back door, his arms full of packages. He stopped short when he saw Lydia, and a smile spread across his face. "You are awake. Good. How are you feeling?" "Sore, but better." Lydia felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of her borrowed clothes and her simply braided hair. Jasper looked impossibly handsome in the morning light, his dark hair curling slightly from the wind, and his blue eyes bright with life. "I brought you some things from town," he said, setting the packages on the table. "Shoes that should fit better, some fabric Ma can make into dresses, and some other necessities I thought you might need." Lydia stared at the packages, then at Jasper. "You did not have to do that." "I wanted to." He shifted his weight, looking suddenly awkward. "I also stopped by the telegraph office and sent a wire to the sheriff in Carson City, letting him know about the stagecoach accident and the driver. They will send someone to recover him properly." The reminder of the dead driver sobered Lydia instantly. "That was kind of you. I should have thought of it myself." "You had other things on your mind," Jasper said gently. "But there is something else. While I was at the telegraph office, I heard some talk. It seems your disappearance has caused quite a stir in Carson City. They are looking for you." Lydia's blood ran cold. "Gerald? And your father? The story going around is that you were kidnapped, possibly by outlaws. They are offering a reward for information leading to your safe return." "Of course they are," Lydia said bitterly. "They cannot admit I ran away. That would be too embarrassing." Jasper exchanged a glance with his mother. "The thing is, Lydia, if anyone in Rawhide realizes who you are, they might try to collect that reward. Money is scarce out here, and people get desperate." "So I need to leave." Lydia stood abruptly, her heart racing. "I cannot put you and your mother in danger." "Sit down," Ruth said firmly. "No one is putting us in danger, and you are not leaving until you are healed and have a proper plan. But if someone finds out I am here, then we will deal with it." Jasper interrupted. "Ma is right. You are not well enough to travel, and you have nowhere to go. For now, you stay here. We will just have to be careful about who knows you are around." Lydia sank back into her chair, torn between relief and guilt. "I do not want to cause trouble for you." "The only trouble would be sending you back to a man you do not want to marry," Ruth said briskly. "Now, let us look at these fabrics Jasper bought and see what we can make for you." The morning passed pleasantly as Ruth and Lydia looked through the fabric and discussed patterns. Jasper excused himself to work on the ranch, but not before catching Lydia's eye and giving her a reassuring smile that made her stomach flutter. She forced herself to focus on Ruth's chatter about stitching and hemming, but her mind kept wandering to the cowboy who had rescued her. Over the next few days, Lydia settled into a routine at the Fitzgerald ranch. Her feet healed slowly, the cuts and bruises fading to tender pink skin, and she made herself useful around the house. She helped Ruth with cooking and cleaning, learned to churn butter and tend the vegetable garden, and in the evenings she would sit by the fire and work on the dresses Ruth was teaching her to sew. Jasper was gone for much of each day, riding out to check on the cattle or mend fences or handle the dozens of other tasks that came with running a ranch. But he always came home for supper, and Lydia found herself looking forward to those evenings more than she wanted to admit. He would wash up at the pump outside, then join them at the table with stories about his day. He had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her, making her laugh when she least expected it, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her painting or the books she had read. Thomas came home for Sunday dinner, a lanky 17-year-old with his brother's blue eyes and an irrepressible enthusiasm for everything. He treated Lydia with friendly courtesy, asking her questions about Carson City and telling her stories about the characters who came through the telegraph office. He mentioned nothing about the missing banker's fiancée and the reward being offered, and Lydia suspected Jasper had warned him to be discreet. It was during the second week of her stay that things began to shift between Lydia and Jasper. She had been at the ranch for 10 days, and her feet had healed enough that she could walk without pain. One afternoon, restless from being cooped up in the house, she decided to explore the area around the ranch. Ruth had gone to visit a neighbor, and Jasper was out with the herd, so Lydia slipped out of the house and wandered toward the barn. The barn was a sturdy structure that smelled of hay and horses. Copper was in his stall, and the big bay whickered softly when he saw her. Lydia approached slowly, holding out her hand for the horse to sniff. "You are a handsome boy," she murmured, stroking his soft nose. "Thank you for carrying me the other night." "He likes you." Lydia jumped and spun around to find Jasper standing in the barn entrance, backlit by the afternoon sun. Her heart was racing from the surprise, or at least that was what she told herself. "I did not hear you come back," she said. "I noticed." He walked into the barn, moving with that easy grace she had come to associate with him. "I finished early today. Thought I might take a ride up to the north pasture, check on the water supply. Would you like to come? I do not want to be in your way." "You would not be. Besides, I thought you might like to see more of the ranch. It is beautiful up there." Lydia hesitated, torn between caution and desire. Being alone with Jasper felt dangerous, not because she feared him, but because of the feelings he stirred in her. But the thought of staying in the house on such a beautiful day was unbearable. "I would like that," she said finally. Jasper's smile was reward enough for her decision. He saddled Copper and another horse, a pretty sorrel mare named Sage, and helped Lydia mount. She had gotten more comfortable on horseback during her stay, practicing in the corral behind the barn, but she still felt awkward compared to Jasper's easy competence. They rode out together, following a trail that wound through scrub brush and desert grass. The September air was warm, but not hot, and the sky above was a brilliant blue broken only by a few wispy clouds. Jasper pointed out landmarks as they rode, showing her where the property boundaries lay and where the cattle liked to graze. He talked about his father, about the dreams James Fitzgerald had for this place, and how hard it was sometimes to keep those dreams alive without him. He wanted to build up the herd, maybe get into horse breeding, Jasper said. He had plans for expanding the house, adding on rooms for when Thomas and I got married and had families of our own. He died before any of that could happen. "What happened to him?" Lydia asked softly. "Thrown from a horse, broke his back." Jasper's voice was tight. "He lived for 3 days afterward, long enough to tell us he loved us and to make me promise I would take care of Ma and Thomas. Then he was gone. I am so sorry. Life out here is hard. You know that going in, but it does not make it easier when it happens." Jasper glanced at her. "What about you? You said your mother died 5 years ago." "Influenza. It swept through Carson City one winter and took dozens of people. My mother was always fragile, delicate. She did not stand a chance." Lydia's throat tightened with old grief. "My father changed after she died. He became bitter, obsessed with money and status. I think he blamed me somehow for surviving when she did not. That is not rational." "Grief rarely is." Lydia managed a sad smile. He started gambling, losing money he could not afford to lose. That is how Gerald Whitmore entered our lives. He owned the gambling hall where my father played cards, and when my father could not pay his debts, Gerald offered a solution. He would forgive everything if I agreed to marry him. And your father agreed to that? Eagerly, he saw it as killing two birds with one stone. His debts would be cleared, and I would be provided for. That I might have objections never crossed his mind. They had reached the north pasture, a beautiful stretch of grassland with a creek running through it. Jasper dismounted and helped Lydia down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. Their eyes met, and Lydia felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. "Come on," Jasper said, his voice slightly rough. "I want to show you something." He led her along the creek to where a stand of cottonwood trees provided shade. Beneath the trees was a flat rock that overlooked the water, and Jasper gestured for her to sit. Lydia settled onto the stone, grateful for the cool shade, and Jasper sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "This was my father's favorite spot on the ranch," Jasper said quietly. "He used to come here to think, to get away from the noise and work for a while. After he died, I started coming here too. It helps sometimes, feeling close to him." "It is beautiful," Lydia said honestly. The creek burbled past, clear and cold from mountain springs, and the cottonwood leaves rustled in the breeze. "Thank you for sharing it with me. I wanted you to see it." Jasper turned to look at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "Lydia, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I know we have only known each other for less than 2 weeks. I know you came here running from one man, and probably the last thing you want is another man complicating your life. But I cannot help how I feel." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "From the moment I found you in that canyon, something changed for me. You are brave and strong and beautiful, and every day I spend with you, I find myself falling a little more." Lydia's heart was pounding so hard, she was sure he could hear it. "Jasper, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted. "I just needed you to know. No pressure, no expectations. But if there is any chance you might feel the same way, I want you to know I am here. I will wait as long as you need." Lydia looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused from work, hers smaller and still soft despite the labor she had been doing. She thought about Gerald Whitmore and his cold demands, about her father and his indifference, and then she thought about Jasper, about the way he had found her in the dark and brought her to safety, about his gentleness and his strength and the way he made her laugh even in her darkest moments. "I do feel the same way," she said quietly. "It terrifies me, but I do. I think I started falling for you the moment you told me I was safe." Jasper's face lit up with such joy that it took her breath away. "Really? Really?" Lydia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I tried not to. I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, that it was too fast, that I was just grateful to you for saving me. But it is more than that. You are more than that." "Lydia." Her name was a prayer on his lips. He raised their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise I will never be like him. I will never try to control you, or change you, or make you into something you are not. I want you exactly as you are." Tears pricked at Lydia's eyes. "How is it possible that I found you? That out of all the ways my life could have gone wrong that night, I ended up lost in the one canyon where you would find me?" "I do not know." Jasper smiled, reaching up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "But I am grateful for it every single day." They sat there beneath the cottonwoods for a long time, talking about everything and nothing, their hands still clasped together. Jasper told her about his dreams for the ranch, about the horses he wanted to breed and the family he hoped to have someday. Lydia told him about her painting, about the landscapes and portraits she used to create before her father dismissed them as frivolous. And Jasper listened with genuine interest and asked to see her work. The sun was beginning to set when they finally rode back to the house. Ruth took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, but she said nothing beyond asking them to wash up for supper. That night felt different to Lydia, charged with possibility and hope. She caught Jasper's eye across the table more than once and felt heat rise in her cheeks at the way he looked at her, as if she were something precious and rare. After supper, Jasper walked her to her bedroom door, as he had every night since she arrived. But this time, instead of simply wishing her good night, he took both her hands in his and drew her close. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. Lydia's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but then Jasper's arms came around her, and she melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was something to be cherished, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I have been wanting to do that for days," Jasper admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "So have I," Lydia whispered. He kissed her once more, soft and sweet, then stepped back reluctantly. "Good night, Lydia." "Good night, Jasper." She closed the door and leaned against it, her fingers touching her lips, a smile spreading across her face. For the first time since her mother died, Lydia felt truly happy. The next few weeks passed in a blur of happiness. Lydia and Jasper spent every moment they could together, stealing kisses in the barn and holding hands beneath the supper table when they thought Ruth was not looking. Ruth, for her part, watched them with obvious satisfaction and made a point of giving them time alone together. Lydia threw herself into life on the ranch, learning to ride better and helping with the cattle. Jasper taught her to rope and brand, to read the weather and find water in the desert. She was stronger than she had ever been in Carson City, her skin tanned from the sun and her hands roughened by work. She felt alive in a way she never had before, as if she had been sleepwalking through her old life and had only now woken up. She also started painting again. Ruth found her some old brushes and a few precious tubes of paint that had belonged to James, who had dabbled in art himself. Lydia set up an easel in the spare room and spent her afternoons capturing the landscape around the ranch. The desert light was different from anything she had painted before, harsh and unforgiving, but also beautiful in its starkness. She painted the mountains in the distance, the cattle grazing in the evening, Copper standing proud in his corral, and she painted Jasper, working to capture the strength in his shoulders and the kindness in his eyes. It was during one of these painting sessions that trouble arrived. Lydia was in her room, focused on a canvas of the sunset over the north pasture, when she heard raised voices from outside. She set down her brush and hurried to the window, her heart sinking, when she saw two men on horseback, talking to Jasper in the yard. One of the men was a stranger, rough-looking and armed, but the other was sickeningly familiar. Gerald Whitmore sat astride a black horse, dressed in his expensive suit and looking completely out of place in the ranch setting. Even from a distance, Lydia could see the anger in his posture. She rushed from the room, nearly colliding with Ruth in the hallway. "Stay inside," Ruth said urgently. "Do not let them see you." "What is Gerald doing here?" "I do not know, but Jasper will handle it. Stay out of sight." Lydia positioned herself by the kitchen window, where she could hear but not be easily seen. Jasper's voice drifted through the open window, calm but with an edge of steel. "I told you, Mr. Whitmore. I do not know anything about your missing fiancé. I heard there was a stagecoach accident out near Copper Canyon, but I did not find anyone." "You are lying." Gerald's voice was cold and sharp. "I have it on good authority that you brought a woman back to this ranch 2 weeks ago, a woman matching Lydia's description. Where did you hear that? The telegraph operator in town has a loose tongue, especially when properly motivated." Gerald's smile was audible. "Now, are you going to tell me the truth, or do I need to search your property?" "You do not have any authority to search anything," Jasper said flatly. "And even if you did, there is no one here but my mother and me. Then you will not mind if my associate here takes a look around." Lydia heard movement, heard Jasper's voice turn dangerous. "I do mind. This is private property, and you are trespassing. I suggest you leave before I make you leave." "Are you threatening me?" Gerald's voice rose. "I am a respected businessman from Carson City, and you are a dirt-poor cowboy. Who do you think the law will believe?" "I do not care what you are or where you are from. You are not welcome here." There was a long, tense silence. Then Gerald spoke again, his voice dripping with false civility. "Very well, we will leave. But know this, Mr. Fitzgerald. If I find out you are harboring Lydia, I will have you arrested for kidnapping, and I will make sure you lose everything, this pathetic little ranch included." "Get off my property!" Lydia heard hoofbeats retreating and sagged against the wall in relief, but her relief was short-lived. Gerald knew she was here, or at least strongly suspected it. It was only a matter of time before he came back with more men, maybe even the law. She could not let that happen. She could not let Jasper and Ruth lose everything because of her. When Jasper came inside, his face was tight with controlled anger. He found Lydia in the kitchen and pulled her into his arms immediately. "He is gone," Jasper said into her hair. "He cannot prove anything." "Thomas," Lydia's voice was hollow. "Gerald said the telegraph operator talked. That has to be Thomas. My brother would never, not on purpose. But if Gerald offered him money or threatened him, Thomas might have let something slip. He is only 17, Jasper. He would not have known what he was doing." Jasper's jaw tightened, but he did not argue. "It does not matter how Gerald found out. What matters is that he did, and he will be back. Which is why I need to leave." Lydia pulled away from him, her heart breaking. "I cannot let you lose your ranch because of me. I cannot let your family be destroyed." "No." Jasper grabbed her hands. "You are not leaving. We will figure this out." "How?" "Gerald has money and connections. He can make your life hell, Jasper. He can take everything from you." "He can try?" Jasper's blue eyes were fierce. "But I am not letting you go. Not now, not ever." "Jasper, no. Listen to me." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I love you, Lydia. I am in love with you. I know it is fast, and I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to marry you, to spend the rest of my life with you, and I am not going to let some pompous banker take that away from me." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. That is why I have to go. If I stay, I will destroy you. If you leave, I will follow you. I will chase you across the whole damn territory if I have to." Jasper pressed his forehead to hers. "We are in this together now, for better or worse." "That sounds like a wedding vow," Lydia said, laughing through her tears. "Then marry me, right now, tonight, before Gerald can come back with his threats and his money. Marry me and become my wife, and then he will have no claim on you at all." "Is that even legal? Can we just get married without any kind of waiting period or license?" "Nevada law says we need a license, but there is a justice of the peace in Rawhide who owes my family a favor. He can marry us tonight and file the paperwork tomorrow. By the time Gerald comes back, you will be Lydia Fitzgerald, and there will be nothing he can do about it." Lydia stared at him, her heart torn between hope and fear. "Are you sure about this? You would be tying yourself to me forever, to all the trouble I bring." "You are not trouble. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Jasper smiled. "So, what do you say? Will you marry me?" Lydia thought about her father, about the marriage he had tried to force on her. She thought about Gerald Whitmore and his cold demands. And then she thought about Jasper, about the life they could build together, about the way he looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Jasper let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. Ruth came rushing in from the other room, demanding to know what all the commotion was about. And when they told her, she burst into tears and hugged them both. "I will need to make you a dress," Ruth said through her tears. "You cannot get married in that old thing." "There is no time, Ma," Jasper said. "We need to do this tonight, before Gerald comes back." Ruth looked stricken, but then her face firmed with determination. "Then we will make do. I have my wedding dress packed away in a trunk. It might be old-fashioned, but it will work." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a beautiful gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant. Lydia changed quickly, her hands shaking with nerves and excitement. The dress fit reasonably well with a few quick alterations, and Ruth pinned Lydia's dark hair up and tucked a few wildflowers she grabbed from the garden into the arrangement. "You look beautiful," Ruth said, stepping back to admire her work. "James would have loved you. He always said Jasper needed someone strong to stand beside him." "Thank you," Lydia whispered, "for everything, for taking me in, for making me part of your family. You were part of our family the moment Jasper brought you home." Ruth kissed her cheek. "Now come on. You have a cowboy waiting to marry you." They rode into Rawhide together, Jasper and Lydia on Copper and Ruth following on Sage. The sun had set and the stars were coming out, bright and clear in the desert sky. Lydia held tight to Jasper's waist, her wedding dress bunched around her legs, and thought about how different this was from the wedding she was supposed to have had. No church, no guests, no elaborate ceremony. Just a simple exchange of vows between two people who loved each other, and that was worth more than all the pomp and circumstance in the world. The justice of the peace was a kindly man named Henry Carson, who welcomed them into his modest home with good humor. He did not ask questions about why they were in such a hurry, just gathered them into his parlor and opened his worn Bible. "Do you have rings?" he asked. Jasper looked stricken. "No, I did not think. Use these." Ruth pulled off her own wedding ring and handed it to Jasper, then retrieved James's ring from a chain around her neck and gave it to Lydia. "It would mean the world to me if you wore these." Lydia's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the simple gold band. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. James would want Jasper to have his ring, and I know he would have loved you as a daughter." The ceremony itself was simple and brief. Henry Carson led them through the traditional vows, and Lydia's voice shook only slightly as she promised to love, honor, and cherish Jasper for the rest of her life. When it came time for Jasper to speak, his voice was strong and clear, ringing with conviction. He slipped Ruth's ring onto Lydia's finger, and she did the same with James's ring, and then Henry Carson pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said with a smile. Jasper did not need to be told twice. He pulled Lydia into his arms and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, while Ruth and Henry Carson applauded. When they finally broke apart, Lydia was breathless and grinning. "Mrs. Fitzgerald," Jasper said, testing out the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I," Lydia admitted. They signed the marriage certificate, Henry promising to file it first thing in the morning. And then they rode back to the ranch as a married couple. The night air was cool and sweet, and Lydia leaned back against Jasper's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her cheek. She was married. She was Lydia Fitzgerald now, bound to the man she loved and free of Gerald Whitmore forever. When they arrived back at the ranch, Ruth tactfully announced she was going to bed early and disappeared into her room, leaving Jasper and Lydia alone. They stood in the front room, suddenly shy with each other, despite everything that had happened. "I suppose we should go to bed too," Jasper said, his ears going red. "I mean, we are married now, so we could share a room, but only if you are comfortable with that. I do not want to rush you into anything." Lydia felt a rush of affection for this strong, gentle man who had become her husband. "I am comfortable with that," she said softly. "I want to be with you, Jasper." He took her hand and led her to his bedroom, a simple space that smelled of leather and sage. Lydia was nervous, but not afraid, not with Jasper. He was patient and gentle, showing her what marriage could be between two people who truly loved each other. And when they finally fell asleep tangled in each other's arms, Lydia felt more at peace than she had in her entire life. The next morning brought trouble as predicted. Lydia woke to the sound of multiple horses arriving and men's voices raised in anger. She sat up quickly, clutching the sheet to her chest, and Jasper was already pulling on his clothes. "Stay here," he said firmly. "Let me handle this." But Lydia had never been good at staying put when there was trouble brewing. She dressed quickly in one of her new everyday dresses and hurried out to the front room, where Ruth was peering anxiously out the window. "It is Gerald," Ruth said grimly, "and he brought the sheriff with him." Lydia's stomach dropped. She moved to the window and saw Gerald sitting astride his black horse, looking smug and satisfied. Beside him was a man wearing a sheriff's badge, and there were 3 other rough-looking men who Lydia assumed were deputies or hired guns. Jasper stood in the yard facing them, his stance relaxed but ready. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The sheriff, a portly man with graying hair, looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I am Sheriff Morrison from Carson City. I have a warrant here for the arrest of Lydia Sinclair on charges of theft and breach of contract." "Theft?" Jasper's voice was dangerous. "What exactly did she steal?" "Valuable jewelry belonging to Mr. Whitmore here," Gerald said smoothly. "Items I had given her as engagement gifts. When she fled our wedding, she took them with her." "That is a lie," Lydia said, unable to keep quiet any longer. She stepped out onto the porch, ignoring Ruth's sound of protest. "Gerald never gave me any jewelry. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back." Gerald's eyes lit with triumph when he saw her. "There she is, Sheriff. Arrest her." "Now hold on," Sheriff Morrison said, raising his hands. "Miss Sinclair, is it true you fled your wedding to Mr. Whitmore here?" "It is true I refused to go through with a marriage I never agreed to," Lydia said, lifting her chin. "My father arranged it without my consent. I am a grown woman, and I have the right to refuse. Be that as it may, Mr. Whitmore here says you stole from him. I did not steal anything. He is lying because he is angry I refused to marry him." "She is the liar," Gerald spat. "She seduced this cowboy and convinced him to hide her from the law. Probably filled his head with all sorts of stories to make herself seem innocent. The only story here is the one you are telling," Jasper said coldly. He stepped up onto the porch and put his arm around Lydia's waist. "And even if your accusations were true, which they are not, you still have no claim on Lydia. She is my wife now. We were married last night." The silence that followed was absolute. Gerald's face went from satisfied to furious in the space of a heartbeat. "That is impossible. You cannot have—" "We were married by Justice Carson in Rawhide," Jasper continued calmly. "The marriage certificate has been filed as of this morning. So, unless you have a warrant for Lydia Fitzgerald, not Lydia Sinclair, you have no business here." Sheriff Morrison looked between Jasper and Gerald, clearly trying to decide who to believe. "Is this true, madam? Are you married to this man?" "I am." Lydia held up her left hand, showing Ruth's wedding ring. "We were married last night in front of witnesses. I am Lydia Fitzgerald now, not Lydia Sinclair." "This is outrageous," Gerald sputtered. "She cannot just marry someone else to get out of her obligations to me." "What obligations?" Jasper asked sharply. "She never agreed to marry you. Her father may have made promises on her behalf. But Lydia is of legal age and has the right to choose her own husband, which she did. She chose me." Sheriff Morrison sighed heavily. "Mr. Whitmore, I am afraid there is nothing I can do here. If Miss Sinclair, that is, Mrs. Fitzgerald, is legally married to someone else, then your warrant is no good. And as for the theft charges, well, you will need to prove she actually took something, which will be difficult if she left with nothing." "This is not over," Gerald said, his voice shaking with rage. He turned his furious gaze on Lydia. "You think you are clever, do you not? Running off to play house with this dirt-poor cowboy. But you will regret it. Both of you will regret crossing me." "Is that a threat?" Jasper asked quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "It is a promise." Gerald wheeled his horse around. "Come on, Sheriff. We are wasting our time here." They watched the men ride away, tension crackling in the air. When they were finally out of sight, Lydia sagged against Jasper, her knees weak with relief. "He is going to come back," she said. "He is going to make trouble for us." "Let him try." Jasper held her close. "You are my wife now, Lydia, mine, and I protect what is mine. He has money and connections, and I have right on my side, and stubbornness. Never underestimate the stubbornness of a Nevada cowboy." Jasper smiled down at her, but his eyes were serious. "I know you are scared. I am too, if I'm honest. But we will get through this together." Ruth came out onto the porch and put her arms around both of them. "That man is a snake, but snakes can be dealt with. For now, let us just be grateful you are safe and married and together." They spent the rest of the day quietly, all of them on edge waiting for Gerald to return. But he did not come back that day, or the next. Word filtered back through town that he had returned to Carson City in a rage, vowing revenge, but unable to do anything concrete. The marriage was legal and binding, and there was no proof of theft because there had been no theft. Lydia's father sent a letter 2 weeks later, delivered by a solemn-faced courier. It was brief and cold, disowning her completely and making it clear she was no longer welcome in his house or his life. Lydia read it once, felt a pang of sadness for what might have been, and then threw it in the fire. She had a new family now, one that loved and supported her, and she did not need her father's approval or blessing. As autumn turned to winter, Lydia settled fully into her new life as Jasper's wife. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the endless cycle of work that kept them fed and clothed. She grew to love the harsh beauty of the Nevada desert, the way the light changed throughout the day, the vast empty spaces that somehow felt more freeing than confining. And she fell more deeply in love with Jasper every single day. He was everything Gerald was not, kind where Gerald was cruel, generous where Gerald was selfish, strong where Gerald was weak beneath his veneer of wealth and power. Jasper treated Lydia as an equal partner, asking her opinion on ranch decisions and respecting her judgment. He encouraged her painting, clearing out a corner of the barn for her to use as a studio, and surprising her with new supplies whenever he went to town. He made her laugh and held her when she cried and loved her with a fierce tenderness that took her breath away. Winter in Nevada was cold but beautiful, the desert taking on shades of silver and gray beneath occasional dustings of snow. Lydia spent her days helping Ruth with household tasks and her afternoons painting. Her work was getting stronger, more confident, and she began to develop a distinctive style that captured the stark beauty of the landscape. Jasper suggested she might try selling some pieces in town, and to her surprise and delight, several sold almost immediately. It was not a fortune, but the money helped, and more importantly, it gave Lydia a sense of purpose beyond being a wife and housekeeper. Thomas came home for Christmas, bringing news that Gerald Whitmore had finally given up his pursuit. He had become engaged to another woman, the daughter of a railroad magnate, and seemed to have decided that Lydia was not worth the continued effort. Lydia cried with relief when she heard, and that night she and Jasper made love with a desperate joy, celebrating their freedom and their future. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Calves were born, the grass grew green after winter rains, and Lydia discovered she was pregnant. She told Jasper one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time, then very carefully set her down and kissed her with such love that her knees went weak. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. "A baby, Lydia, our baby. Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy? I am the luckiest man alive." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Boy or girl, it does not matter, as long as they are healthy and loved." The pregnancy was not easy. Lydia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and the desert heat as summer approached was oppressive. But Ruth was a steady presence, helping with remedies for nausea and making sure Lydia rested enough. Jasper became impossibly protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work and fussing over her constantly. Lydia found it both annoying and endearing, and they had their first real fight when he tried to stop her from riding Sage. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said sharply. "I have been riding for months, and I am not going to stop just because there is a baby coming." "What if you fall? What if something happens? What if I go crazy from being cooped up in the house all day?" Lydia shot back. "I need to move, Jasper. I need to feel useful. Please do not treat me like an invalid." They had argued back and forth until finally Jasper relented, making her promise to be careful and to stay close to the house. It was a compromise Lydia could live with, and the fight actually made her feel better. It proved they could disagree and work through it, that their marriage was strong enough to weather conflict. As summer gave way to autumn again, Lydia grew round with the baby. Her painting shifted to include mother and child themes, soft portraits of Ruth with baby Thomas that she created from Ruth's descriptions. Imagined scenes of what her own child might look like. Jasper built a cradle with his own hands, working late into the night to carve and sand until it was perfect. They prepared the spare room as a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and filling it with blankets and tiny clothes Ruth had sewn. The baby came on a crisp October morning, almost exactly 1 year after Lydia had fled through the canyon and found Jasper's lantern. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Lydia thought she might not survive it, but Ruth was there coaching her through, and Jasper held her hand and refused to leave even when things got messy. And finally, the baby arrived with a lusty cry that filled the house. "It is a boy," Ruth announced, tears streaming down her face. "A beautiful, healthy boy." They named him James Wyatt Fitzgerald, after Jasper's father and the wild country that surrounded them. He had dark hair like both his parents and Jasper's blue eyes, and when Lydia held him for the first time, she felt a love so powerful it nearly stopped her heart. This was her son, hers and Jasper's, proof of everything they had built together. Jasper wept openly when he held his son for the first time, cradling the tiny body against his chest with infinite care. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your papa. I am going to love you and protect you for the rest of my life." Thomas came home to meet his nephew and was surprisingly gentle with the baby, holding him carefully and making faces that caused James to wave his tiny fists. Ruth was in her element as a grandmother, constantly knitting new clothes and offering advice that was usually helpful and only occasionally overbearing. The first year of James's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and joyful days. Lydia had never known she could be so tired and so happy at the same time. The baby was demanding but sweet-tempered, and watching Jasper with him made her fall in love with her husband all over again. He was a natural father, patient and playful, singing old cowboy songs to make James laugh and walking the floor with him during colicky nights. The ranch continued to grow. With Lydia's painting bringing in extra money and Jasper's hard work building the herd, they were finally starting to get ahead. They added on to the house, building the extra rooms James Fitzgerald Sr. had dreamed of, and Jasper began breeding horses as his father had wanted. Life was not easy, but it was good, filled with love and purpose and the satisfaction of building something together. When James was 2 years old, Lydia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter was born on a warm spring day, it felt like their family was complete. They named her Rose Eleanor Fitzgerald, and she had her mother's dark eyes and delicate features. James was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help care for her, and bringing her treasures he found around the ranch. As the years passed, more children followed. A second son they named Daniel, who had Ruth's gray eyes and a mischievous streak a mile wide. Then another daughter, Margaret, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved to paint with her mother. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children running wild and Jasper chasing them through the yard, while Lydia watched from the porch with a smile. Thomas eventually married a school teacher from Rawhide and brought her to live on the ranch, building a small house on the western edge of the property. Ruth lived to see all her grandchildren, passing peacefully in her sleep when James was 10. Surrounded by the family she loved, they buried her next to her husband on the hill overlooking the north pasture, and Lydia planted wildflowers on the grave that bloomed every spring. Lydia's painting career flourished beyond anything she had imagined. Her work gained recognition throughout Nevada and even beyond, with galleries in San Francisco and Denver showing her pieces. She painted the life around her, the ranch and the desert and her growing family, and people responded to the honesty and love in every brushstroke. The money from her art meant they could hire help for the ranch, could send the children to good schools, could save for the future. But despite their success and growing prosperity, Lydia and Jasper never forgot where they had started. Every year on the anniversary of the night they met, they would ride out to Copper Canyon and sit beneath the stars where Jasper had first found her. They would talk about everything and nothing, remembering the scared girl in the torn wedding dress and the cowboy with the lantern who had saved her. "Do you ever regret it?" Jasper asked one year when they were both in their 40s and their hair was starting to show gray. "Running away, marrying me, choosing this life?" Lydia looked at him, at the face she loved more than anything in the world, and smiled. "Not for a single second. That night in the canyon, when I saw your lantern, it was like seeing hope itself. You gave me a life, Jasper, a real life with love and purpose and freedom. How could I ever regret that?" "I love you," he said simply. "More now than the day we married, if that is possible." "It is possible," Lydia said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "because I feel the same way." They sat there as the stars came out, the same stars that had shone on them that first night so many years ago. The canyon was unchanged, eternal, but they had changed profoundly. They were no longer the scared, lost girl and the young cowboy with everything to prove. They were partners, parents, pillars of their community. They had built a life together from nothing but love and determination, and it was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible. When James grew up, he took over most of the ranch operations, working alongside his father and eventually taking a wife of his own. Rose became a teacher, following in her aunt's footsteps and teaching children in Rawhide. Daniel decided to try his hand at politics, running for local office and winning, making his grandmother's dream of having a son in government come true, even if it was a generation removed. Margaret followed her mother into art, studying in San Francisco, and returning to open a gallery in Rawhide that showcased local artists. Lydia and Jasper grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their children grow and have children of their own, filled the house with grandchildren who ran wild just as their parents had. Jasper's hair went white, and Lydia's hands grew stiff with arthritis that made painting difficult, but they faced each challenge together, as they always had. One evening, when they were both in their 70s and the sun was setting over the desert they had called home for so long, Jasper took Lydia's hand and led her out to the porch. They sat in their old rocking chairs, the ones they had occupied for decades, and watched the sky turn gold and pink and purple. "Do you remember what I promised you?" Jasper asked. "That first night, when I found you in the canyon?" "You promised I was safe," Lydia said softly. "You said you had me. And I meant it. I have had you every day since, through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, and I will have you until my last breath." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lydia Fitzgerald. My love, my life, my everything." Tears ran down Lydia's cheeks, but they were happy tears. "And you are mine, my cowboy with the lantern who led me out of the darkness and into the light. I love you, Jasper, today and always." They sat together as the stars came out, hands clasped and hearts full. The canyon where they had met was still there in the distance, dark and mysterious in the gathering night. But they did not need to visit it to remember. The memory lived in their hearts, as fresh and bright as if it had happened yesterday instead of half a century ago. They had built a life together against all odds, two people who should never have met, finding each other in the vast emptiness of the Nevada desert. They had raised a family, built a legacy, loved each other through everything life threw at them. And when their time finally came, they would face it together, as they had faced everything else, hand in hand and heart to heart. Years later, when both Lydia and Jasper had passed peacefully in their sleep, within months of each other, their children gathered to sort through their belongings. They found letters Jasper had written to Lydia over the years, love poems and simple declarations that showed the depth of his devotion. They found Lydia's paintings, dozens of them, documenting their life together in brilliant color and loving detail. And in Lydia's studio, carefully preserved, they found the torn and blood-stained wedding dress she had been wearing the night she fled into the canyon. "Why would she keep this?" Rose asked, holding up the ruined silk. James, who had heard the story of his parents' meeting countless times, smiled. "Because it represents where she started, the life she ran from, to find the life she was meant to have. Mama always said that the worst night of her life led to all the best days. She kept it to remember." They buried the dress with Lydia, along with the lantern Jasper had been carrying that fateful night. On their shared headstone, placed on the hill beside James and Ruth, they carved a simple inscription that told their story better than any long epitaph could have. Here lie Jasper and Lydia Fitzgerald. His lantern led her to his arms. Love guided them the rest of the way. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story, but never forgetting the foundation. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure where Jasper had first brought Lydia remained intact, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. The children and grandchildren would take their own children to Copper Canyon and tell them the story of the lost girl in the torn wedding dress and the cowboy whose lantern light saved her. They told of the love that grew from that one chance meeting, of the family that was built on a foundation of courage and devotion. And every young person who heard the story came away with the knowledge that love, real love, was worth any risk, any sacrifice. Lydia's paintings hang in museums now, documenting a way of life that has largely disappeared. But more than that, they document a love story for the ages. In every brushstroke you can see it, the joy and contentment of a woman who found exactly where she was meant to be. Jasper's letters have been published, studied by scholars as examples of frontier life, but also treasured by romantics who see in his simple, heartfelt words the kind of love most people only dream of finding. The Fitzgerald Ranch still stands in Nevada, though it is smaller now, and the family who runs it bears a different name. But on clear autumn nights when the stars shine bright over the desert, people say you can sometimes see a light in Copper Canyon, a lantern swaying gently through the darkness as if searching for someone lost. And if you are very lucky, very quiet, you might hear the sound of a woman's laughter and a man's voice saying, "I have got you. You are safe." It is just a story, of course, a legend that has grown up around the memory of two people who loved each other well. But legends exist for a reason. They remind us of what is possible, of the magic that can happen when two souls find each other against all odds. They give us hope that somewhere out there, our own light is shining in the darkness, waiting to lead us home. Lydia Sinclair wandered lost through the canyon that night in 1908, running from a life she never wanted toward an uncertain future. But Jasper Fitzgerald's lantern led her to his arms, and in those arms she found everything she had been searching for without knowing it. Love, purpose, freedom, family, a life worth living, and a love worth celebrating. And that, in the end, is the only story that matters. Not the hardship or the struggle, not the obstacles they overcame or the enemies they faced. Just two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk the rest of the way together, hand in hand and heart to heart, until the very end and beyond. Their love story became the stuff of legend in Nevada, told and retold until it was hard to separate fact from fiction. But the core truth remained unchanged. In the vast, unforgiving landscape of the American West, in a time when women had few choices and life was hard for everyone, one woman chose freedom over security and found both. One man chose love over caution and was rewarded beyond measure. Together, they built something that lasted, something real and true and beautiful. The canyon still stands, unchanging and eternal. The stars still shine overhead just as bright. And somewhere in the space between memory and dream, a lantern still glows, waiting to guide lost souls home to love.